Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1. You have the power to see someone's level and stats. One day, while looking at levels, you find someone showing 3 question marks, with the title of admin above their head. The person looked at you and said, "Isn't it rude to look at someone's level without their permission? Could have asked me first." Written by that 2009 weird emo kid. I almost spat up my beer after hearing that. There wasn't anyone else in the tavern, only the dwarvish bartender stood nearby. He was too busy cleaning a mug to acknowledge us, though. His stats were still there, high constitution and wisdom with a level of 30 floating next to his name, so I hadn't lost my mind. The ability still worked, and it just hadn't applied to her somehow. The lady kept watching me from the other end of the bar, resting her chin on the palm of her hand. She had pink eyes and a matching silky veil across the lower half of her face, but otherwise looked just as human as me. And gorgeous. A really stunning woman. How did she know about me? I'd never told anyone about my ability. It paled in comparison to all the other amazing skills in the world. I even considered it a curse at times, reminding me just how much weaker I was than my peers. This was different, though. A high-level individual could at least be perceived and understood. The lady's power broke the limits of my scanning ability. I couldn't even feel her aura. The only thing I could see was 3 question marks where her stats should be, except for a maxed-out luck stat of 9,999 and the word admin above her head. I didn't even know a stat could go that high. For some reason, the realization sent a shiver down my spine. "Well," the lady said, "aren't you apologizing?" I looked away, gripping my mug. Sorry, I'll leave." The lady chuckled. "I was only joking. Please, aren't you celebrating? Don't leave." I paused. "How did you know?" Your fancy wizard robe looks brand new. Did you just get accepted to the academy?" Yeah." The lady raised a glass of wine. "Then cheers." I shyly approached her. "Who are you?" "A fan of the magical arts, nothing more. You caught my eye earlier today, during the entrance exam. I was sure that you'd get in. Good job." "Really? You were there?" "Yep, it's part of my job." "Which is?" To keep things fun." I frowned. "That wasn't very helpful." The lady giggled. "I never meant it to be." "The entrance exam wasn't exactly fun either." The lady pouted. "Why?" "I almost died several times, actually." "And triumphed." I hung my head. I know, but..." "But what?" "I only got lucky. The reason I passed was because I teamed up with whoever had the highest level." The lady raised an eyebrow. "Really? Was that all?" "Well, no, I tried that at first, but the strongest candidates weren't interested in teaming up with a human. Still, there were tons of people with incredible stats that were being overlooked. It wasn't hard to assemble a well-rounded team." "So what you're saying is that you gather the most competent people available and turn them into an effective unit. That doesn't sound unearned to me. If anything, it sounds like you were rewarded for a good party composition." "I can't keep relying on this, though. My skill wouldn't help in many circumstances." "And what does? There is no such thing as a perfect ability. Certainly, it is overrated. Trust me, you wouldn't want your destiny subject to the whims of fate. A little less randomness goes a long way to make sure that things stay balanced for the better." "Try telling that to my new classmates." "They'll learn in time, or suffer the consequences eventually. Getting lucky or making the best of what you have is just as much of a skill as anything else. The fact that you had the courage to take the test, one that hadn't been passed by a human in decades, shows that you have created an advantageous position for yourself with your ability. Just like any other candidate. That's the problem with most people. They all think they're above Fortuna's blessing, so they never bother seeking it, wasting their opportunity to enjoy the great game by playing it the safest way possible. Which is just boring in my opinion. You made your own luck today. Be proud of that." I sighed, smiling. I guess you're right. Thanks for..." The lady was gone. I looked around the tavern, but I was the only one inside. When I asked the bartender, he said he didn't see her leave. She had already paid a tab, though. And mine. For the rest of the night, How lucky. Most of my peers, the new students that had just been admitted, were out celebrating with each other, so I didn't know if going out tonight would make me feel better. That conversation with a lady made drinking alone slightly less depressing. I regretted not asking her out, though. It wasn't until I sat down again and gulped down another beer that I realized I might have just spoken with a god. End of story. Story number 2. Humans Have a Superpower. Written by Swirl Life, 1997.
When the Terrans first made contact with the broader galaxy, it was tentative and primitive. Their planet Earth resides in a far-flung solar system with less than a dozen planets revolving around it. Beyond even the furthest Federation outpost, their signals were very basic radio waves sent out to the aether, and it took over 200 light-years for them to reach the nearest Federation post office. Their message was simply,
Is anyone out there?
Of course there were. The Federation comprises of over 10,000 solar systems and 1,000 times that many allied planets. The first to respond back were the Quapoans, a race of insectoid people notable for their warlike disposition. There is hardly ever a time where they are not at war with themselves or with their neighboring planets, and the people of Quapu are notable for their savagery and ruthlessness. It is not that we wanted them to go. They were just the closest with the faster-than-light travel capabilities from the Olympia system, so despite the Federation's preferences, the Quapuians were the first to encounter these humans. What they saw on their planet stunned them to their core. Now, there are, of course, over 10 million planetary allies in the Milky Way Federation, and while some of them have the concept of non-aggression, none could be said to be peaceful. The Federation itself was formed centuries ago in a fire system to prevent absolute destruction between various galactic empires. The majority of our works comprises reducing harm between warring factions and providing aid to refugees, because peace is never an option with empires that can appear at your doorstep within moments. But the humans have been warring with themselves since the moment they climbed out of the trees in the African savannah, according to their own records. In fact, the vast majority of their history seemed to be bloodier than the Quapuans, but that is not what the visitors to Earth found when they arrived. Because of the limitations on radio wave transmission, none of us could have known what to expect. But the report of the Quapuans brought back, along with a few ambassadors of Terran homeworld, shocked everyone on the Federation's High Council. In the intervening 200 years after the first signal transmission, the humans had not sat idle for a response. The Quapuans sent a delegation of generals along with their commander-in-chief to negotiate an immediate surrender of the planet and to make Earth a Quapuan colony. Even with their special translator devices, the first discussion was impossible because the humans apparently had over 7,000 languages that they can speak and write, and the smartest of them are capable of learning over 24 and using them all with equal proficiency. In fact, it is more accurate to say that the humans of their United Nations were able to learn the Quapuan language easier than the strange visitors could learn to communicate with the Terrans, particularly those from a nation called Ulsa. With all the Quapuan clicks and trills and soft human mouths shouldn't be able to make. We're the first to actually get a meaning across with the Quapuan generals. The first question was, are you friends? The United Nations was apparently formed about 250 years ago, after the second of the human world wars. There have been plenty of civil wars before, but never on this scale. The conflict supposedly ended with the country of America dropping 2 nuclear fission bombs on a separate nation of Japan. The devastation that these weapons can cause is virtually never used on one's own planet. For the ecological and sociological impacts, less than 60 Earth solar cycles later, this United Nations was formed, and all war was outlawed across the globe. Representatives in international games called the Olympics solved disputes with feats of strength and athleticism that impressed the Quapuans greatly. In the intervening months, the Quapuans realized the humans only wanted one thing: peace. friendship.
Matthew Rogers put down his paper, looking at the long table full of over 100 different alien races. Their faces were gaunt, round, excited, and tired. They were scaly, furry, hairless, and many had multiple limbs. They looked inquisitively at this primitive Terran features. Only 2 eyes and 32 teeth. But they all listened with rapt attention as the human raised his eyes, sparkling with hope and gentleness, and looked at each and every one of them in turn. Eye contact was something these Terrans were not afraid of. In fact, they felt it a sign of respect rather than a challenge. He spoke in 10 different intergalactic languages, translating his words personally in addition to the translator device held in his mouth. For the briefest of all attention, he smiled as the High Council raised their hands and claws in turn, a unanimous vote to approve the Good Neighbors Act, establishing Earth as a Federation embassy and a neutral ground for peace talks between planets. His grandfather's grandfather would be proud. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons: Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakal, and Arcadian.